So moving on to Chicago, I guess the first time it came up on my radar was, I want to say, back in spring of last year, because a trade publication I follow had stated in one article in one line that Chicago was looking at privatizing its water system. And I made some calls to folks that I talked with in Chicago, and no one had heard anything about this, and it hadn't been in the paper. And I talked to one journalist who was interested in doing an article, and he hadn't heard anything, wasn't getting anywhere. And then much, much later, I guess it was when Daley was presenting his budget, he sat down with the Tribune, I think, and talked about his budget, and it was asked if he was considering this. I think that was actually because this independent journalist had written an article that had gotten around saying, Curtis Black? I don't know. Okay, he'd done an article eventually before the budget was presented saying, look, this trade publication says there's been a meeting or something and the mayor is looking at it. And this came up. Yes. And so one person told me that, and I don't know if they're privy to information, but that article that had come up in the meeting between the Trib and the mayor, and they said, is this true? And that was when he said, well, nothing's off the table. And that was the quote that came out in the Trib article. And it also was mentioned, I think, in that same article that he had met with a Spanish-Australian consortium called Macquarie, I forget the second half of the name, but and that they had discussed a water privatization deal. But that was and that sparked a couple articles that came out and a couple TV news stories, I think, saying, is the mayor looking at selling the city's water? And the Sun-Times did a simple poll looking at what services would people be willing to sell off for a quick buck. And drinking water and wastewater were at the very bottom of those options. People were hugely against it. Since then, the mayor said very, very little. I think they've gone further to say the only project lease they were actively pursuing was a lease of Midway. And that doesn't tell us much about, it tells us one thing about Midway. It doesn't tell us anything about their intentions toward the water system. And then, of course, as you all probably know, just in the last 7 or 10 days, it was announced that they're going forward with trying to strike another Midway deal. And so I guess in terms of opposing these lease deals, because, that's where Food and Water Watch falls. We try to advocate for public ownership straight up. A couple things, I guess, that we encourage is start early because these things often become public after there's been much discussion behind closed doors and some movement toward actually accomplishing these privatization deals. Working in coalition is important because organizations on their own rarely can prevent these sorts of things from happening. And then broadly educating folks in the city and the community who'd be impacted is critical because you need a lot of voices involved. And those things were all done in Milwaukee. So I would say, like I said, some winning principles: start early, work in coalition with other groups, and broadly educate the community, because this is one of those issues, water privatization, that when people hear about it, they are almost always opposed to it. They don't want corporate control of drinking water and their access to bathe and to clean and to eat and to cook. And it's definitely an issue that you can organize around for that reason, and get people involved and build membership and do all these things that lots of groups want to do. To mention a few strategies that have been used, I mentioned the referendum is one. It's not one that we always advocate because it's a heck of a lot of work to win a vote. They had LeBron James. Do you guys know LeBron James? Okay. They had LeBron James doing robocalls against us. I know, yeah, right? I like LeBron. Liked him. You know what I mean? So anyway, but that's one thing that worked in Akron. I think preventing the financial advisor hire definitely slows the process and can stop the process, or at least making that hiring a financial advisor much more transparent about how they're going to be paid and who it's going to be and whatnot. That's another important tactic, and that's what slowed things down in Milwaukee. Also, Milwaukee, we are, as a sort of proactive step now that we think it's off the table for a while, is we're trying to pass in council a resolution against water privatization, and it wouldn't be binding legally, but what it would do is it would sort of pin them to a vote on this, and we think it'd make it harder for them to move a privatization in a year if they had voted against doing it, last year. I mean, I can say about Food and Water Watch, what we do is, we're a national organization. We're based out of D.C., and we have some offices around the country. We don't in the Midwest. But what we do is we offer support to communities that want to oppose this, because it's got to be, like I said, it's got to involve lots of education locally and groups locally to do it. And so I'm in D.C. to meet with organizations this week and talk to them about their interest in getting into this and their involvement, and then to try to connect the groups up if there is broad interest. And the things that we can do is, we have a research team, so we've already started on a report about a sort of financial analysis of what a lease in Chicago would look like and what could be the results. That will probably release to the press in the next month, I think. So we can do research and offer that to community groups to use. We can bring speakers. We have budget to send speakers who've had experience with privatization elsewhere in the U.S. To events in Chicago. We sometimes can be a sort of a locus of organizing, a place to meet or to help hold meetings for groups that have never worked together before or focus in different areas. So I don't want to ramble on. That's the basics of what I wanted to get out there. Should we?
Okay, question and answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know of groups already in Chicago that are organizing around this?
No, I know of groups that are interested in this, and I can't say that anyone is beginning a campaign around this. So I can mention a couple things. So, for instance, Illinois PIRG worked with Alderman Wagspack to introduce a resolution in early October. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this. I'm sorry, not a resolution, an ordinance that would set stricter standards for leases in general in Chicago. And so the idea, it was really inspired by the parking meter fiasco. And it wouldn't apply just to water, but to leasing all sorts of city assets. And so I know that Illinois PIRG is interested in this water lease discussion because it sort of motivates folks to, hey, let's organize around this ordinance and get this passed, because it would protect us in a water deal and many others. And so I know they're interested. I'm going to meet with Alderman Wagspack while I'm in town to learn more about that. I think Citizen Action, is anyone familiar with Citizen Action? Okay. I haven't met with them, but I understand that they are interested in the issue. I haven't heard that they're necessarily moving on it yet. And also I've had some conversations with AFSCME, who's obviously concerned about this. We've worked with AFSCME in both Akron and Milwaukee. They were a critical coalition member. And without them, we couldn't have won, I don't think. And so I know AFSCME is concerned about a water lease, but I don't think there's any active movement yet at this point.